Hey guys, it's Andy. We have a very special addition to the heap, and that is the 96 Grand Cherokee. It has a 5.2 V8, very similar to the Durango, but the Durango's a 5.9, this is a 5.2. It's 4x4, picked it up last weekend. It's going to be a fun little project, you guys will get to follow along. It's not in bad shape body-wise, the interior leaves something to be desired, but it is what it is. If it was nice, then it probably wouldn't be on this channel. Or it would be at some point, but not just yet. So anyway, today we are going to be doing an oil change on it because the oil in there looks like tar. So here's the things you'll need to do an oil change. Oil drain pan, new oil, whatever size socket you're gonna need. This plug's a 16. I need an extension, a ratchet, this oil filter removal wrench, a couple paper towels, and the oil filter. This is a standard Mopar oil filter. I mean, it is more or less a Dodge engine, or a Chrysler engine, I'm sorry, so it can use a Mopar oil filter. One of the important things you'll see here is it looks like a little rubber disc inside these holes. On this type of oil filter, the oil goes in here dirty and comes out the center clean. So what this is on engines where the oil filter is mounted really low, or pretty much all of them that have this style of filter, once the oil system's pressurized, it'll operate as normal, but when you shut it off, this little rubber piece is a one-way valve, so it stops the oil from flowing back down into the bottom of the engine. And if it did that, basically that would cause it to start dry. So this is called an anti-drain back valve. A lot of manufacturers use it, some don't, but I always recommend trying to find a filter that has it. It's very useful. Now, trick is some engines have the filter upside down, some engines have it sideways, some have it completely upside down. On vehicles where it's sideways or completely upside down, I try to get as much oil into this filter as possible before I start the engine. So I'll actually take oil from the container and pour it in here, and it'll kind of absorb some of it, and then you just keep pouring until you get, about 3/4 of the way full, depending on what position it's in. You don't want to spill too much, but what that does is when you crank over the engine, it helps limit the time that it takes to fill this oil filter, and that time while it's filling this, most of your engine isn't getting lubrication, so the most you can eliminate that, the best. So we'll go ahead and get started. Alright, now I know it may look nerdy or sound stupid, but anytime you're under the car, wear safety glasses. Especially under one that's all dirty and stuff like this. I mean, 9 times out of 10 you'll be fine under the car, but the one time you don't, you'll get crap in your eye and it sucks. I wear contacts, so something gets under the contacts, it will really trash your eye. Anyway, we got the drain pan pushed under. Here is the oil drain plug. That is for the oil pan on the engine. Once I pull that out, all the oil will come out. Now, I kind of cheated in the fact that I loosened that plug because it will be really hard for me to unscrew that with one hand. So, just take this out. Then I'm gonna get oil all over my hand, so a lot of the time it's good to do this when it's not hot. So let's take this out, and we'll see all the oil come out, and we will let it drain. Nice and black and gross. Alright, well, you can see it is empty, so let's go ahead and thread the plug back in carefully. Make sure it goes in right so you don't cross thread it. And then I am going to snug it up. Alright, well, I used the oil filter wrench to loosen the oil filter. I'll show you guys how it works when I get this out, but I know the video's upside down, but just loosen this guy, and this is when you typically get covered with oil. So just make sure it doesn't fall because it makes a god-awful mess. So just take this out, and then when it unscrews, try to keep it with the open part up as much as possible. Oh sweet, didn't make that much of a mess. I'm working right down here by the starter, so I have the battery disconnected so I don't have an issue with arcing or whatnot. Yeah, it was time. This thing's pretty dirty. But take this, bring him out here. Here's the new one. I put some oil in it and I put the box over it so I don't get any garbage in it, but it's going to be kind of hard to get it in there. But what you want to do is, this O-ring right here is what makes it seal against the engine block mating surface, or the oil filter adapter, I'm sorry. So make sure it came off on the old filter. If not, you got to go in there and pull it off. But trick is, take some of the fresh oil and lube this O-ring up, because what will happen is if it's dry, when you're tightening it can bind and tear, and then when you start the car it will spray oil all over the place. So crawl back under here and get this started. Alright, once again, video's upside down, but it's hard to see, but there's the oil filter. Now there's a company, there's actually a couple different companies that make different options for these things. Unfortunately, this one is just a standard steel case oil filter, so what happens is if you get any oil on the outside of it, it becomes really slippery and hard to screw in. So I know there's one company that makes a high performance one that has a nut welded to the outside of it so you can put a wrench on it, and then there's another company that sprays on this compound that's kind of rough even if it gets oil on it so you can get traction with your hands. But what I normally do is just wipe it off, then you can screw it on. You don't have to gorilla grip on it or anything, but just make sure it's pretty tight. Then you're done under the car. Now the way this oil filter wrench works, I told you I'd show you, is as it turns, it gets tighter. So what you do is you put it on the filter like so, to the back, and it tightens. Then it lets you turn it. It's great for tight spaces. Works really, really good. They have them in different sizes. And then there's a few companies that make one that looks like a giant socket that goes onto the end of the oil filter, because you can see it looks like it has all these flat spaces on it, so it'll go over the end of it, and then it has a socket adapter on it. So either one works great. Now on this engine, the oil fill is right here, and the dipstick went right here. So I'm getting differing values on how much oil should be in here. Some are saying 4, some saying 4.5, close to 5. So I am going to err on the side of 4.5, and then I will check it and add more if I need to. So pretty self-explanatory. Just take the oil and pour it in. On a lot of these bigger containers, it has the quart designation, so 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, all the way up to 4.5. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and add it. So I went ahead and added all the oil. Keep in mind, the oil filter will still hold some extra because it's not completely full. So if your engine capacity says 5 quarts, you buy a 5-quart jug, that's okay, but don't worry if it's showing full on the dipstick, because when you start the truck, it usually will, oil filter usually absorbs 1/4 to 1/2 quart. So go ahead and put that in. Got the dipstick. This guy will tell you how much oil is in your engine. It'll have an add. So basically, if it's below this little mark in this area, you need to add. If it's up in here, it's full. It'll say like don't overfill. If you're curious about how much oil your vehicle takes, you can look in the manual, you can look online, or 99% of the time you can call an auto parts store and they'll tell you. So just make sure that the dipstick goes back in, like this one is not. Come on. A little harder to do with one hand. In this truck, it has a pretty big curve down at the bottom of the dipstick, so kind of got to fight it. So what you do on this one I disconnected the battery, like I said, because I was down there by the starter and I didn't want any arcing. But we'll connect the battery, and 6 in, that's in. Got oil in it, so we will come over here. Like I said, this thing's not in the best shape. Needs a new driver's seat, but other than that, it's not too bad. Now, some vehicles have an oil light and some have an oil gauge. This one has an oil pressure gauge, so when you start it, it won't register for a few seconds, but just want to make sure that you have oil pressure when you start it. And wait for it. And it got quiet, and there it is. There is oil pressure. So, pretty much done. Then all you do is just drive around a little bit, make sure it's not wet underneath, and make sure there's no leaks, and you'll be good to go. So, yeah. Some vehicles have just an oil warning light, and that just runs off a pressure sensor, so if there's not enough pressure, the light will come on. But some of the vehicles that have a more advanced instrument cluster will have the gauge. So anyway, hope you learned something. Hope you can do a couple oil changes yourself, save yourself some money. All right, till next time. Thanks, guys. What I forgot to mention is if you use all the oil in your jug, you can pour the used oil into it and then take this back to the auto parts store and they'll recycle it for you. Say your engine uses 5 quarts, pretty much like this one does. Essentially, you empty out this jug and you pour what's left in that in here, and then you can see how much oil your vehicle consumed, either leaked or burned, and then you kind of get a good idea about how healthy the engine is oil-wise. So anyway, figure I'd add that. Thanks, guys.